A significant and widespread severe weather outbreak is expected today and tomorrow across portions of the Great Plains, into portions of the Midwest, and even the southern United States. This will bring the potential for several to numerous tornadoes, some of which could be strong to intense or even potentially violent, especially tomorrow, along with the potential for widespread very large hail up to baseball to even softball size in some areas. This event will also likely bring the potential for widespread damaging wind gusts up to 80 to 85 miles an hour and some scattered flash flooding in certain areas. So anyways, let's get straight into this weather forecast. First of all, looking at our Day 1 SPC outlook, you see we have an enhanced risk of severe weather from southwestern Minnesota into much of Nebraska, all the way into north-central Kansas and northeastern Colorado. Our slight risk of severe weather extends from the eastern Texas Panhandle all the way into central Minnesota and all the way into central Michigan as well. Here's our tornado risk for today. You can see we have a 15% tornado risk, mainly across northeastern Nebraska, northwestern Iowa, and southeastern South Dakota. And our 10% tornado risk extends from north central Kansas into southwestern Minnesota. Our 5% tornado risk across Michigan is in central Michigan. And in those two hatched areas, we can see a few strong to intense tornadoes later today. They probably might go Sig 2, but I don't know yet. It might bust as a tornado risk. Right now, we do have a 15% damaging, or 30% damaging wind risk, from southwestern Minnesota all the way into eastern Nebraska. And in the hatched area, we could see some 80 to 85 mile an hour damaging winds later, and our 50% damaging wind risk extends from southern Minnesota into north central Oklahoma and into central Michigan. And here's our hail risk for today. We have a large 30% hail risk from southwestern Minnesota, southeastern South Dakota, into north central Kansas, and into northeastern Colorado. And our 15% risk extends from the eastern Texas Panhandle into central Minnesota. And we have another one across central Michigan. And in the hatched area, we could see some hail up to the size of baseballs later today. Now, tomorrow is a little bit of a different story. Have a moderate risk of severe weather, mainly across a portion of southeastern Nebraska and eastern Kansas, but I would not be surprised if it got expanded a little southwestward or a little towards the northeast. Our enhanced risk extends from much of Iowa into north central Oklahoma, and our slight risk is from north central Texas all the way into the upper peninsula of Michigan. Our tornado risk for tomorrow, we have a Sig 2 tornado risk from north central Oklahoma into southeastern Nebraska. Our 15% tornado risk is from southwestern Iowa into eastern Kansas. Our 10% tornado risk extends from central Iowa all the way into north central Oklahoma. And our 5% tornado risk is from the upper peninsula of Michigan, the Canadian border up there, all the way down to north central Texas in that hatched area. The Sig 1 area there, we could see some EF2 tornadoes, maybe an EF3 tornado, but in the darker area, the darker hatched area, we could see some intense and potentially violent tornadoes tomorrow. I would not be surprised if we see a small Sig 3 risk added tomorrow, just because of how bad the tornado risk could be. For damaging wind risk, we have a 30% damaging wind risk from the border of the upper peninsula of Michigan and Wisconsin all the way down to north central Oklahoma. Our 15% damaging wind risk extends from north central Texas all the way into western central Michigan and the southern upper peninsula of Michigan as well. And in that hatched area, we could see some hurricane force damaging wind gusts up to 80 to 85 miles an hour. And for our hail risk, we have a very heightened hail risk. We have a 45% hail risk across southeastern Nebraska into eastern Kansas, and our 30% hail risk extends from southwestern Iowa into north central Oklahoma. In the Sig 1 area there, we could see some hail up to the size of baseballs, but in the Sig 2 area, which is the darker hatching with the full lines, we could have some hail from baseball size to softball size being likely tomorrow. So if you're in those areas, make sure you're prepared for that. Next, looking at our excessive rainfall outlook from the Weather Prediction Center for the next couple of days, you can see for today we have a large marginal risk of excessive rainfall for northeastern Kansas, northern Missouri, all the way into northern Michigan, the upper peninsula of Michigan, and much of Wisconsin and Minnesota there. It also includes a lot of Iowa, eastern Nebraska, and southeastern and eastern South Dakota there. That is a 5% chance of flash flooding within 25 miles of any given point. We will likely see some isolated flash flooding today, but flash flooding will likely not be the main concern. However, tomorrow paints a completely different picture in the flash flooding sector. You can see we have a large slight risk of excessive rainfall from eastern Nebraska and eastern Kansas, all the way through northern Missouri, western Illinois, much of Iowa, western Wisconsin, all the way into southeastern Minnesota, where we could see some scattered flash flooding. That's a 15% chance of flash flooding within 25 miles of any given point, so make sure you are receiving flash flood warnings for that, as well as if a marginal risk, even though the threat is lower, you can still see some isolated flash flooding from the western upper peninsula of Michigan all the way down into north central Oklahoma, and there's still potential this could get upgraded or expanded some, so make sure you pay attention for future updates. Next, we are going to look at some weather models here, starting with the HRRR. We are going to use the 6Z runs of all of these models, since the 12Z ones are either incomplete or haven't come out yet, and I want to use complete model runs here. So here's where we are about now at 12Z here. Well, that's about the 12Z run here. So you can see we have some storms lingering in southern Wisconsin and eastern Iowa there. By 20Z, you can see we have some storms out there in north central Nebraska and moving into eastern Nebraska and eastern South Dakota. You can see we could have a tornado threat there briefly, but after that, we will have a few more supercells try to fire in southeastern Nebraska and northeastern Kansas before it all bows out into a couple linear segments, and this is where our flash flood threat will begin here. We can see some heavy rain, but thankfully it'll probably move fast out of the area there, so nothing too significant will happen with a flash flooding threat, although we will likely see some large hail and some significant damaging winds with that. And as we go into tomorrow, you can see that moves off to the southeast, and by 18Z we have storm initiation. 20Z, you can see we have a couple supercells, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, and they'll stay discrete for a little bit before they become a bowling segment there, and that will bring a significant damaging wind threat there. But if you're in southeastern Nebraska, north central Kansas, eastern Kansas, even southwestern Iowa, northern Missouri, Iowa, be prepared for a significant day of tornadoes, large hail, very large hail, destructive hail, and some significant damaging winds. And eventually that will all move off to the east, bringing a significant damaging wind threat and a flash flooding threat. Next, we'll look at the wrap. So for this, we will use the 9Z model, since the 6Z and the 12Z, the 0Z are not full model runs. It's different from the other models, but that's fine. It's not as high resolution as well, but still considered a high resolution model. So here's where we are about now. You see those storms in southern Wisconsin, eastern Iowa. Around 17 to 18Z, you can see the storms there. And you can see, it's hard to see the supercells, but you can see a few across eastern South Dakota into eastern Nebraska there. And by around 0Z, they become a damaging wind cluster and bring some damaging winds, and then they clear out in the morning tomorrow. And then tomorrow you can see we have some storm initiation there with some supercells potentially. Before that all becomes a damaging wind threat, flash flooding threat, we will likely see significant tornado threat, significant hail threat, around 18Z to 22Z before it all becomes a damaging wind threat, maybe some isolated large hail and some flash flooding. Finally, we are going to look at Vietnam. You can see we're around 12Z right now, so you can see we have storms in southern and central Wisconsin and eastern Iowa. And this is by 3 hour intervals, so you can see by 18Z we have some storms trying to fire up there. The name actually doesn't show much for supercells out there, so if the name is correct, the tornado risk probably won't be as high. But you can see by 0Z we have some storm firing in eastern Nebraska, and those will bring a damaging wind threat as they move east through Iowa, and those eventually will clear out throughout the morning tomorrow. And then you can see around 0Z, the NAM has some initiation in eastern Nebraska and central Kansas, which could be a supercellular threat at first before it becomes a damaging wind threat and a large hail threat and a flash flooding threat down the line. But initially, they will produce some very large hail, some strong to intense tornadoes there, so make sure you're prepared. And then, as we go into Tuesday, the line moves east and brings a widespread but low and severe river threat to much of the Ohio Valley into the southern United States. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel and leaving a like on this video. And I will see you all in the next weather forecast. Goodbye.